Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. Rook Calder knelt in the street of Bleakwater with dust in his mouth and a shovel in his hands, digging a grave while the Red Sickle Riders laughed from their saddles. Isolde's blue ribbon, torn and dirty, lay on the ground like a dropped piece of sky. Varric Quince, the man with the wolf grin, had made Rook dig the hole beside the well where neighbors once shared water and gossip. Now the only sound was the shovel biting dry earth. He kept his eyes down so they would not see the wet in them. Isolde had begged him to leave town at dawn. He had said they were safe. He had been wrong. His knuckles burned. The shovel struck a stubborn root. Someone tossed a bottle that shattered. The men laughed again. Rook swallowed hard and thought only of the next scoop, then the next. When the hole looked big enough for the coffin he did not have, he stopped. Varric clapped slow, like a lazy teacher. Rook wanted to rise and draw, but his holsters were empty, his guns taken. Shame pressed heavier than the desert heat. He breathed dust and grief, tasting metal and sun-baked silence. When Varric tossed the blue ribbon at his boots, Rook could not look away. It was the last thing that had touched Isolde's hair that morning, when she stood in the doorway with bread flour on her hands. Varric's voice slid over the street like oil. "You did good, Calder. Now bury your pride. Remember who owns your heir." The riders turned their horses and drifted off, leaving hoof prints like brands across the town's memory. Rook did not move until the wind lifted and set the ribbon trembling. He took it and closed his fist. He could not bury her. There was no body. They had taken even that. He stared at the hole until the edges blurred. In the rippling heat he saw Isolde laughing beside the well, water on her lashes. The day he promised he would never let harm find her again. He had failed her in the same place he had sworn to protect. Something quiet inside him went still, like a lake freezing without a sound. Rook stood. He had no guns. He had a ribbon and a name. Sometimes that was enough to start a war. He turned toward the livery, certain now. The livery smelled of hay and iron. A boy named Jory slept in the tack room, hat over his eyes. Rook moved like a shadow, lifted the lid of an old feed trunk, and found what he had left there years ago when he swore he was done. A long knife wrapped in oiled cloth. A worn belt with a hidden derringer. A canteen. His heart worked steady. He slid the knife across his back under his shirt, clipped the derringer to his boot, and saddled the black mare Moth. She flicked an ear, reading his grief. As he tightened the cinch, a board creaked. Rook turned. An old woman stood in the doorway, small as a stump, with eyes that had watched too many winters. "You can't ride at them alone," she said. Rook did not answer. "They camp at Sable Hollow," she said softer. "Tonight they'll be drunk on victory." Rook met her eyes and saw a sorrow that was older than his. "Bring her ribbon back with blood," she whispered. Rook nodded once. When he led Moth into the street, a glint winked from the church belfry. Someone else was watching. The belfry held a patient rifle. The desert opened like a book of bone. Rook rode west as the sky burned down to embers, the mare's hooves drumming a tireless prayer. He felt the ribbon inside his vest, soft and brave, the last warm thing in a world gone cold. He kept his mind small. Ride, breathe, find them, end it. Moonlight drew ghosts on the rocks, and the wind carried the smell of mesquite and old ash. Rook remembered meeting Isolde by the river, the way she had laughed without looking away, like she was giving him a map to somewhere safe. She had made a home out of a room with one window and a table that wobbled. She had told him his hands could build again. He had believed it. At Pale Sky Ridge, He dismounted and led Moth along the shadowed path that dropped into Sable Hollow. Voices drifted up. Laughter. Tin cups. Then something small and terrible. A music box. The tune scraped against his heart. It was the one Isolde wound at night. Hope rose like fire in dry grass and scared him more than fear. If they had her music, they might have her breath and lights still somewhere. Rook slid on his belly to the lip of the hollow and peered down. Fires painted the faces of the riders, turning their smiles into masks. Varric sat with his boots on a crate, turning a small silver key in his fingers. The music box lay open beside a jug. A blue shawl hung from a tent rope, and Rook's lungs forgot how to work. A cough came from the tent, thin as paper. Rook's fingers closed around the knife, and the world narrowed to the space between his heartbeat and the ground below. He traced paths through the camp with his eyes, counting men, measuring steps, feeling the old map of violence wake inside him. Just then, cool iron touched the back of his neck. A voice like gravel said, "Move and you die." Rook stilled. He knew the feel of an old Spencer rifle, knew the breath of a man who had waited long enough to be sure. "Easy," the voice said. "I'm not your enemy." Rook said nothing. "She's alive," the voice breathed close to his ear. "But not for long if you rush." Rook closed his eyes once, then opened them to the dark. He listened. The voice belonged to Silas Bran, once sheriff, now a ghost that towns forgot to bury. Rook had known him in another life, before Isolde, when men said Rook Calder's shadow shot faster than most hands. Silas eased the rifle away and laid beside him, eyes on the camp. "You were always a storm," Silas murmured. "Storms save nothing by charging. They clear by timing." Rook tasted the old respect and the old anger. "You followed me from Bleakwater," he said. Silas nodded. "Watched Varric make you dig. Watched you not break." They lay silent until the music box wound down. Then the tune began again, gentle and cruel. Silas said, "We wait for moonshift. They drink, they sleep, they leave a hole in the guard." Rook could wait with his body, but not with his mind. The ribbon under his vest throbbed like a second heart. To keep from breaking, he walked backward inside himself to a day when dust smelled like bread and not blood. He returned to the first time he met Isolde May under rain that felt like grace. She had stood in a doorway, lamp low, eyes warm, asking if he was hungry and tired. He had been wet broke, and hunted for a job he took because his stomach growled louder than his conscience. He had shot a man who deserved shooting and two who had been standing too close. Isolde did not ask for the story. She set a bowl in front of him and a dry shirt on the chair, and said he could talk when he needed or never at all. Rook watched her make a small room feel like a safe country. He found the shape of sleep there, his first in weeks. He woke to morning light and the quiet sound of a music box, the same tin song now drifting up from Sable Hollow. Isolde had wound it with a shy smile and said it once belonged to her mother. "It strings the day together," she said. Rook had felt something shift inside him, like a fence post finally set straight. He hung his guns above the hearth the day she agreed to be his wife, and built a table that did not wobble. He learned the names of clouds. He learned how to say thank you without words. For a while, the world let him. It listened. Varric Quince had not always worn that wolf grin. Years back, he had been the scared kid who ran messages for a freight line, quick on his feet and honest as rain. Rook taught him how to ride hard without breaking a horse, and how to tie a bandage one-handed. Varric called him brother until a job turned bad and money turned sweet. A coach from Cinder Bluff carried payroll for a mine that starved its men. Rook planned to take the gold, pay the crew, and vanish. Varric planned to keep it and carve his name into fear. They argued on a ridge with thunder crawling across the sky. Lightning answered first. 3 men died who should not have. Rook dragged Varek from the edge and could have let him fall. He did not. He left him with breath and a warning. Years later, Varek sent back thanks with a burned ranch and a buried friend. Rook understood then that some debts grow teeth. The day he married Isolde, he told Silas he was done with storms. Silas nodded and said the plains kept their own calendars. Now the calendar had turned, and it pointed to blood again. Back on the ridge, Silas marked the camp with a finger, drawing air paths. 2 at the north fire, 1 walking the remuda. Varek under the awning, your tent in the center, he said. There's a boy, Rook whispered. Silas's jaw moved. Jory, he said. They took him from the livery after you left. A small shape curled near the tent rope, too still for sleep. Rook felt the plan in his bones change its shape. Isolde, the boy, the music box, the men, the open spaces between them. We cut the lantern, Silas said. Smoke and wind will do most of the work. He slid a small flask into Rook's hand. Lamp oil, he said. But listen to me. You go where the song is, and nowhere else. I'll pull the guards. Rook studied his old friend's eyes and saw a cost already counted. Why are you here, Silas? He asked. The sheriff looked at the stars like they were witnesses. Because I was late to my own grief, he said. I won't be late to yours. A coyote cried, and the camp answered with laughter. The wind shifted, carrying whiskey breath and the tang of gun oil nearby. Moon shift came like a lid closing. Silas slid away without a sound, and soon a new noise rose from the far edge of camp, a mule braying wild. Men cursed and stumbled toward it. Rook slipped down the slope, belly to dirt, then flowed through shadow to shadow until the tent rope brushed his cheek. The music box played and clicked. He cut the flap and entered the dark. Isolde, he breathed. A figure lay bound on the ground. He touched a shoulder. Small. Wrong. Jory's eyes opened wide and wet. Rook's knife worked fast. Where is she? He whispered. The boy shook and glanced at the crate where Varek's boots had been. Rook pulled the lid. Empty space stared back. The tune scratched on, and under it he heard the far crack of a rifle and a man's short scream. Silas had started the second part of their plan early. Rook lifted Jory and turned to leave, when the music stopped mid-note. From the darkness behind him, a match flared, and Varek's voice smiled. You always did pick the wrong door, brother. Light spilled over barrels wired to powder, fuses hissing like snakes in dry grass around them. Rook did not blink. Fuses hissed toward the powder like white snakes in dust, and the boy shook in his arms. He set Jory behind a crate, dropped to his knees, and crushed one burning cord with his palm, then another under his boot. The tent breathed smoke and sour saltpeter. Varek held a match near his grin and watched, amused, as if Rook were a dog doing a trick. Rook rose slow with empty hands. His canteen bumped his hip. He slipped it free, poured a dark ribbon, and stamped until the last ember died. Varek clicked his tongue. You always were fast, brother. The match burned low, orange on his teeth. Rook edged left, placing himself between Varek and the boy. Far outside, a rifle cracked once, then again. Camp voices turned. Rook took the music box from the crate and wound it once. The tune chimed bright and cruel. He set it on the barrel lip and let it sing. Varek's eyes moved, and that was enough. Rook drove forward, caught Varek's wrist, and twisted the match away. It fell and died in a puddle. They stood breathing smoke, eyes fixed, hands empty of mercy. For now, Varek smiled like a cut. He rubbed his wrist and studied Rook, as if they were 2 men at cards and not 2 wolves in a cage. You came for a grave, he said. You will leave with a rumor. She is not here. Rook tasted metal. Where? Varek shrugged. She rides east with a preacher who blesses the living for a price. Name your prayers, Rook. He tapped a barrel with his boot. Not powder, he said, and kicked the lid aside. Lamp wicks, nails, and sawdust. I like my thunder loud and messy. Rook saw the plan now. At the first spark the tent would vomit fire and iron. Anyone rushing in would be torn. You wanted the boy to die, Rook said. Varric smiled. I wanted you to choose. Outside, Silas hooped, and another man cursed. Jory clutched Rook's sleeve. Sir, he whispered, there is a flap cut low on the back. They push food through there. Rook felt the ground tilt. Varric's eyes flicked to the canvas seam by the dirt. He had not known the boy noticed. There was the hole. There was breath of night. Rook touched the hilt across his spine and waited. Rook moved on a breath. The knife flashed from his shirt and kissed Varric's cheek, drawing a thin, bright line that stung more pride than skin. Varric laughed and stepped back, hand open, inviting the dance. Rook did not dance. He tossed the blade into his left hand, scooped Jory with his right, and dropped to the canvas seam. One swipe cut it wide enough to crawl. Night wind slid in cool and sweet. Go, he said, pushing the boy. Jory wriggled out like a lizard and vanished under the wagon. Varric lunged. Rook flung the music box at his chest. It struck, clanged, and fell open. The tune leaped, then stuttered. Rook saw the inside plate as it turned, and his heart paused. The engraving was wrong. The script curve did not match. This was not Isolde's box. It was a copy with a cruel song. Hope burned. She had kept hers. She was still herself. Varric reached for his pistol and found air. Rook's boot had pinned the holster. Outside, a mule screamed, a tent collapsed, and the camp ran to put out a fire that did not exist. Silas was pulling threads. Rook slid into the night. The night grabbed him like a brother. Rook rolled beneath the wagon, caught Jory's shoulder, and pointed toward the rocks. Run to the mare, he whispered. The boy ran. Gunfire punched the dark from 3 places at once. Silas answered with 2 neat shots that turned men quiet. Rook rose into a sprint, low and fast, using tents and shadows like doors. He reached Moth, threw Jory up, and cut the lead rope. Silas slid from the gloom with smoke on his sleeve and a nick on his ear. He grinned like pain. I thought you liked quiet work, he said. Rook swung into the saddle and pulled Silas up behind. Varric shouted orders that sounded cheerful. Let him go, boys. We will write letters on the road. A bullet kissed Rook's ribs and wrote fire beneath his skin. He held the saddle horn until the world steadied. They burst from the hollow and climbed the ridge. Wind slapped their faces clean. Silas leaned near Rook's ear. Quince spoke true about the preacher, he said. A string rider named Father Arcady took a woman east this afternoon at Shale Ford. He blesses the living for a price. Mercy is extra. They reined in at the crown of the ridge. The camp below raged and then slowly lost its teeth. Rook tore a strip from his shirt, pressed it to the burn, and tied it hard. Jory clung to the saddle with both hands, eyes bright with fear and pride. Silas watched the eastern dark like a man reading a map only he could see. Father Arcady is no true holy man, he said. He runs a mercy trail for men who pay. Iron Briar buys bodies to work the black salt pits. He calls it charity. Rook felt the ribbon against his chest like a small living bird. We cut him off, he said. Jory cleared his throat. Sir, there is a shortcut the drovers use when the river is high. A place called Widow Stair. It drops hard and fast to the flats near Mercy Crossing. I have ridden it with Mr. Hobb to fetch lie. Silas met Rook's eyes. The boy earns his keep. Rook nodded. They wheeled the mare and started east. Wind rose and carried a sound thin as glass. Somewhere in the dark, a bell rang, steady and patient, like a hand turning a key. Wind pushed against Rook's face as Moth took the broken steps of Widow Stair, shale sliding under iron shoes. Jory clung behind him like a burr, jaw set, eyes bright with fear that was turning into courage. Silas followed on a paint he had cut from the hollow, hat gone, hair silver with dust. Far below, lanterns moved along the flats like slow stars, a thin bell ringing between breaths. Rook felt the blue ribbon warm against his chest and made his world small again. Breathe, steer, survive the next turn. The path pinched to a goat trail chiseled into the cliff. Bats brushed past like thoughts a man did not want. When they reached a narrow shelf, Rook slid down, tied Moth low, and crawled to the edge. The lantern line wound toward Mercy Crossing, a flat stretch of river where men rolled out a bridge of lashed barrels. He counted mules, guards, and the black wagon in the middle. A small cage rode on its bed. He felt the air change with cold water smell and iron. He tasted salt and fear. Silas eased beside him, eyes steady. There, he whispered. Father Arcady's coat caught lantern light. Hot. Silas pointed to a notch in the ridge shaped like a broken tooth and jerked his chin. There, he said, and Rook nodded. They slipped into the notch and let the dark hide them. From there, Rook could smell river mud, wet rope, and sweat baked into leather. The lanterns drew nearer until he could pick out faces and the sway of reins. At the front rode a man in a black coat with a white collar. His hat brim shaded his eyes, but his mouth wore a pleasant curve that meant danger. He led a gray mule hitched to a plank bridge rolled tight like a carpet. Two men behind him pushed barrel floats with poles. Ropes creaked, and the bell kept time in a patient way. Rook felt his heart match it then break free. He scanned for the line's soft places. Tired men, lazy knots, drowsy eyes. He marked the black wagon at the center and the small cage on its bed. A padlock gleamed like a star. Silas breathed. Wait for the river. Wait for the middle, then make them choose. Rook nodded and gripped the knife tucked along his spine. He tasted dust and plan. The river spread wide at Mercy Crossing, slow on top, quick below. Its skin rippled with moon rip. Men rolled the bridge out like a rug and kicked the barrels into place. Arcady lifted a hand, and the line halted with practice. He bowed his head and spoke words the wind carried away, then smiled as if blessing money. Rook watched the gray mule test the first plank. The wood flexed and held. He studied knots, counted steps, and felt where fear would bloom. Calm guns, he thought, and measured which eyes were calmest. He looked past the center wagon and found a second shape hidden by canvas at the rear, low and narrow. Chains hummed when the cart jolted. That was a second cage for a single body. He tasted iron and saw Isolde's lash line on her wrist. His breath hitch clipped short. Silas touched his sleeve once with 2 fingers. Not yet. Rook nodded and set his boot against a loose stone that leaned over the path. Move the world a little. Make the river do the rest, he told himself, and pushed slow. The slab shivered, waited, then slid off into the dark. Cold. The falling stone struck the lower path with a hard crack, then bounced into the river with a flat splash. The gray mule shied and tugged. Men shouted and pulled ropes. Arcady only lifted 2 fingers, and everything slowed like a lesson. Hold, he said in a voice, and the line obeyed. Silas slid away, a shadow peeling from shadow, working toward the flank. Rook squeezed Jory's shoulder and signed with 2 fingers. Hold, then run to the mare when called. The boy nodded, jaw set tight and curled. Rook belly crawled to the shelf edge and set his boots against another loose slab. Below, Arcady reached into his coat and raised a little cross of polished wood. He smiled at the river like it was a child. Rook pushed. The slab went over and hammered the planks, breaking 2 lashings. Barrels yawed. Water grabbed a rope, and the bridge sagged. A man fell to one knee, cursing God and luck. Silas's rifle cracked once from the opposite side, and a guard screamed. Another shot came, sure. Panic began to write its quick letters. Arcady's smile did not move. He raised his hand again and pointed toward the center wagon. Chaos opened like a gate. Rook ran for the center wagon, knife out, breath steady. Silas's rifle worked from the dark, measured and loyal. One rider dropped, then another. Men dragged the bridge straight while the river leaned on it like a bully. Rook swung up, slashed the lashings, and hauled the cage door wide. 3 women spilled out, wrists raw, eyes huge with shock and will. "Go to the notch," he said, pointing towards Silas. They ran. Rook ripped at a canvas roll under the bench and found a ledger, tags, and a silver key. Iron Briar stamped every tag. He pocketed the key and turned. Arcady stood at the planks with a patient smile, hat clean, coat black. He called, "You look for one, for Isolde. She is not among those who walk tonight." Rook felt the words hit and pass through, leaving only heat. He ran for the rear cart, the narrow crate that rang like chain. He tore the canvas and met empty air and straw. A decoy, built to sing false hope. Arcady bowed. "You must ride faster," he said gently. The bell rang again, thin and sure. Rook heard hooves on the far bank. They rode until dawn pulled a gray sheet over the world. The flats opened wide and flat, dotted with scrub that smelled like pepper and old smoke. Silas bled a little from his ear, but his hands were steady on the reins. Jory's teeth chattered from cold and the leaving of fear. Rook felt every hoofbeat in his ribs, where the bullet had kissed him. He pulled the ledger from his vest and thumbed its stiff pages while Moth kept her long, tireless run. Names and numbers marched in ink. Beside them, little symbols like seeds and spurs. Some marks were fresh still. He found Isolde's name written small, with a curve that pinched. The mark beside it was not Arcady's hand. It was a sharp, jumpy script he knew too well. Varric. Silas watched the page while writing. "He does the gathering," he said. "Arcady sells the trail. Iron Briar pays by the head." Rook's lip drew tight. Old debts had grown long arms. He closed the book and breathed through the ache. The bell kept sounding ahead, steady as a clock on a judge's wall, pulling them like a string. He tightened the cinch and leaned low again. Near noon they reached a dry station where a lone wind pump creaked beside a trough cracked by sun. An old rail spur cut the earth like a scar. 3 freight cars sat on the line with their doors open like mouths. No crew, no horses, no voices. Only a canvas parish tent staked in the lee of a dune, and a table with a white cloth. On the cloth stood a Bible, a tin cup, and a bell. Arcady's bell. Rook dismounted and went straight to the table, knife loose in his hand. The bell's clapper was warm when he touched it. Someone had just rung it. Silas moved to the rail cars with his gun low, using the wheels as cover. Jory fetched water that did not taste like metal and passed the cup without drinking. Inside the tent, Rook found another ledger, blank, and a folded note. "Brother V," it read, "The East Run is clean. Send our gray dog." It was signed with a little cross and a flourish. Rook's hand shook once. Varric and Arcady rode each other like kin. He looked up as a shadow crossed the tent wall. Boots stopped outside, then moved away. Silas whistled soft. Rook stepped out and saw tracks layered on tracks. A string of shod hooves, 2 wagons, and a lighter set of boots that wove in and out of the line. That light step had a hitch, like the right ankle favored pain. Isolde had once twisted her ankle on a river stone, and never fully trusted it. His throat tightened. They followed the prince around the rail cars to a shallow cut where the spur bent toward a black vein running north. Salt. Wind lifted dust that tasted sour on the tongue. Men had scraped the earth to the bone and stacked the bone in rows never ended. Iron Briar's pits lay beyond the far ridge, the ground there bleached and dead as moon. Rook glanced at the wind pump. A strip of blue cloth fluttered from a nail on the post, tied with a quick, messy knot only a soul used. He took it and pressed it to his mouth. She was close enough to leave a mark. He tucked the strip with the ribbon and felt courage swell like floodwater. Then the pump stopped. The wind died in a heartbeat that did not belong to weather. The station went quiet in a way that pressed on the ears. From the east drifted a dry rasp, then the distant whine of wheels. Silas's eyes sharpened. "Coach," he said. Rook moved the boy and the mare into shadow of the freight car and crouched low. Jory held his breath. A coach rolled into view, painted dove gray, sides marked with a fish and a cross. 2 white mules pulled, ears flicking. The driver wore a preacher's collar and a rope belt. Father Arcades second. On the roof sat a trunk with a brass lock. Rook watched the trunk more than the driver. He felt the wrongness of its weight in his bones. The coach slowed by the tent. The driver climbed down and rang the bell with the same patient hand. Then he prayed aloud, words simple as stones. Silas stepped from behind the car with his badge pinned to his torn vest and his gun low. "By the grace you sell," he said, "stop right there." The driver froze, then smiled. "Of course, Sheriff," he said sweetly, and reached for his belt like a man easing his coat. His hand flicked, and a tiny derringer coughed smoke. The shot took Silas high in the shoulder and spun him to one knee. Rook's body moved faster than thought. He fired his boot gun through the rail gap and took the driver in the thigh. The man fell with a cry that sounded surprised, then angry. Jory ran to Silas with the tin cup, hands steady. Rook crossed the ground in 5 long strides, kicked the derringer away, and pressed his knife to the driver's collar. "Where is she?" he said, voice flat enough to cut glass. The man sucked air and smiled through clenched teeth. "Which she?" he managed. Rook pressed harder. The trunk's lid rattled on the roof, as if someone inside fought sleep. Rook's heart jumped to his mouth. He climbed the wheel and dragged the trunk down, brass biting his palms. The lock key fit. He turned it and lifted the lid. Inside lay a braid of dark hair tied in blue, a torn dress sleeve, a bell clapper, and a letter sealed with wax. "No body, only pieces." The driver laughed. "She travels ahead by rail. You are late again." Rook felt the sun burn cold. He took the letter and broke the seal. Rook broke the seal and read with care like on a fuse. "Brother Rook," the letter began in Arcades' neat hand. "Mercy is a road we build for those who cannot pay. You owe much. Bring back what you took, and you may have back what was taken. Come to Iron Briar Gate by sundown tomorrow. Bring the blue ribbon for proof. Come alone, or send your old badge friend to collect your bones." Rook read it twice, then again, until the words lost their light. He folded the paper and tasted dust. Silas bound his shoulder with Jory's bandana and stood without swaying. "We have a day and miles enough to drown a horse," he said. Rook nodded. He looked at the freight cars and felt a door in his mind click. Rails were faster than hooves if a man could make them move. He lifted his chin at Silas. "We borrow iron," he said. Jory's eyes went wide. He had never stolen anything bigger than a biscuit. Rook put a hand on his head and smiled without joy. "We will not steal. We will return it later, heavier with good." He folded the letter and set his jaw. They found the yard shack half buried in sand. A key hung on a hook above a ledger where names had faded to ghosts. Rook took the key, and they walked the line until they reached a squat switcher engine painted red. Its boiler was warm from the sun, but the gauge sat on 0. Silas climbed into the cab like a memory and moved levers with hands that remembered weight. "Used to back trains for the mine," he murmured. The words tasted of years he did not brag about. Jory carried wood and a pail. Rook split tinder and fed the firebox until the smoke smelled like hope. Steam crept up, then faster. The engine sighed and found its breath. Rook felt a shiver pass through him, the kind a horse gives before a run. Silas grinned around his hurt. "We will need a car," he said. They coupled an empty flat, roped Moth and the paint to the stake rings, and tied themselves a place to sit. When the whistle cried, the planes threw the sound back like a dare. Rook pulled the bell cord once. It answered in that same patient way, folding time into the day. They rolled north along the salt vein, wheels drumming a rhythm that steadied Rook's breathing. The world opened and closed in slices. Gullies like knife cuts, scrub like stubble on a jaw, bones of cattle bleached to chalk. Jory watched everything with the hunger of a boy learning a trade he never asked for. Silas stared ahead, eyes on the shimmer line where heat made sky and ground argue without mercy. Rook sat with the blue ribbon in his palm and let old memories walk past like men leaving a bar at dawn. He remembered laying his guns over the hearth the first night, Isolde tucking the music box into a drawer like a secret. He remembered swearing to become a man who planted, not a man who tore. The bell rope moved under his hand as the engine ate the miles. Near mid-afternoon, they saw riders strung along a ridge to the west, 6 of them keeping pace. Varric's hat brim shone like a coin. He raised a hand in greeting, casual as a neighbor. Rook felt the shape of the trap inside the invitation. He did not wave back. He checked the pressure gauge and fed the fire. At a narrow cut where rails hugged a bluff, the riders dropped onto the line and paced the engine close. Varric called afternoon, brother, like the old days. Rook kept his eyes on the track and one hand on the throttle. "What do you want?" he said. Varric smiled and pointed at the flat car. "I want a ride, and a talk, and the ribbon you hold like a holy thing." Silas folded the rifle across the cab sill. "You step wrong," he said, "and you walk on one leg forever." Varric laughed and lifted 2 fingers. His men held back. Jory did not breathe or blink beside Rook. He heeled his horse close and swung up to the flat with a cat's grace. He sat on a stake, legs loose, like a boy fishing. Rook could smell the old tobacco on his coat. "You keep the train," Varric said. "Arcady keeps the woman. I keep the road. Deal says we all get paid. I wrote the letter you read, because I knew you would come." Rook felt the heat of the firebox on his back and the heat of hate in his chest, and kept both from running wild. Jory edged toward the coupler with a mallet he had found, face pale and set. Silas saw and shook his head once. "Not yet." Varric turned his smile toward the boy. "You fetch courage like water," he said. Jory's mouth pressed thin. Rook eased the throttle down a hair and let the engine coast. Wind lifted Varric's hair and showed the white scar Rook had left on his temple long ago. "Listen, brother," Varric said almost softly. "You do not beat Arcady at gates and papers. He is a stream that wears rock down. You beat him by walking away with your life. Give me the ribbon, take your badge friend and the boy, and go." Rook looked at the moving line, the long white stretch ahead, and felt the bell rope rough under his hand in the cab now. "No," he said. Varric's eyes went dull like a door closing. He pulled a whistle from his pocket and blew one short, sharp note. From the ridge ahead, a barricade slid across the rails, 6 logs chained together. The engine would hit it in less than a minute. Varric stood and bowed. "Time to choose," he said, cheerful as ever now. Indeed, the logs slid across the rails and locked there, chain links snapping tight. Rook saw no gap and did not see time. He threw the throttle forward to squeeze every breath of steam into speed, then cut it and reached for the brake. The engine shrieked. Sparks jumped like angry bees. Varric laughed against the wind. "Choose, brother," he shouted, cheerful as Sunday. Jory moved before Rook could speak. He ran to the coupler with the mallet, set his feet, and swung at the pin. The first hit rang dull. He swung again, and cried out as the mallet bit his palm. Silas lunged and hauled him back, then dropped and jerked the pin with both hands. Metal screamed. The flat leaped free and rolled on, Varric swearing and scrambling to stay upright. Rook hauled the brake off and shoved the throttle. The engine leaped forward, chasing its own cart. Rook tasted steam, oil, and fear soup. He prayed without words to an ear that would hear. The flat hit the barricade, logs popping chains, wood flying in wet cracks. The engine smashed through the broken gap a breath later, boiler humming like a heart that had chosen to live. Splinters rained the cab. A log half broke and tried to climb the front plate like a wild thing. Rook leaned back and held the bar with both arms, teeth bare. Silas covered Jory's head with his body and cursed in a steady prayer. The engine bucked, surged, and then found rails that still ran straight. Behind them, the flat skidded off the tracks, took Varric with it, and tumbled into white dust. He rolled and rose in one smooth piece, small now in the rear view, hat gone, grin still there. He lifted both hands and clapped slow, proud. Then he pointed east with a flourish, as if giving a gift. Rook stared ahead until his eyes watered, and the image burned away. He did not look back again. Jory shook out his aching hands and tried to smile, but his mouth would not obey. Silas's face had gone gray under the dust, and his left arm hung slower than right. "You bleed on my floor," Rook said. Silas smiled. "It will dry now." He tied the shoulder tighter and breathed through his teeth. The gauge crept back up. Iron Briar's Gate rose like a gallows against the heat. Iron Briar Gate was not a gate so much as a mouth. 2 posts carried iron letters that spelled charity with nails. Beyond them, salt pits terraced the earth like steps to nowhere, men and women moving like ants that had forgotten why. A rail platform stood to one side with a small office that looked harmless. Men in dust coats watched the line with flat eyes. Rook stopped the engine short of the platform and let the boiler breathe. He took the blue ribbon from his vest and tied it to his wrist, so his hand would remember its weight. Silas nodded once. Jory licked lips gone white. A man stepped from the office with a book and a pen. His coat was neat. His face was kind and empty. He looked at the engine, the horse ropes, the boy, the bandaged man, and the ribbon on Rook's wrist. Then he smiled like he had just found the page he needed. "Welcome," he said. "Father Arcady will see you now." He opened the book and tapped a blank line. "Name of goods," he said mildly, as if asking about sacks of meal, and not a woman with a life. Rook stepped down with the ribbon bright and the knife hidden. He wrote 3 words on the line in a hand that made the clerk squint. "Not for sale." The clerk's smile did not move. He tilted his head toward the office. Father Arcady came out as if from a stage, coat straight, collar white, hands clean. He carried the music box in one palm and turned the key with the other. The tune rose bright and hard and light. Sweat crawled down Rook's back and stuck his shirt to skin in heat. Arcady set the box on the table and looked at the ribbon. "Proof," he said very gently. Rook lifted his wrist and let the blue show. "Where is she?" he asked. Arcady's eyes were nice. He pointed past the pits toward a far barracks with a red roof. "She waits there," he said. "She asked me to tell you to be calm." Lie, Rook thought, but could not stop the hope that tried to live. He stepped closer. Arcady lifted the bell and rang it once, a patient sound that made guards on the ridge look down without moving. Varric's voice drifted from behind the office like smoke. He came around the corner with his hat back and his grin made new, as if the earth liked him too much to keep him down. His coat was torn and his hands were empty, which meant he was dangerous. "Brother," he said, and looked at the ribbon on Rook's wrist. He moved faster than Rook thought his body could. He caught Rook's arm, kissed the ribbon with 2 fingers like a priest, and sliced it free with a hidden blade. He danced back and bowed, blue trailing like captured sky. Arcady smiled and lifted the music box lid wider, the tune cheerful as a lie told kindly. Guards stepped onto the rails on both sides, calm guns held lightly. Rook saw the plan locked together like gear teeth. He had come to trade breath for breath, and found a play with parts set long ago. Silas's voice came low and even behind him. "Jory," he said, "run." The boy ran for the engine. Rook set his feet and breathed. He would not leave without Isolde, ribbon or no ribbon, plan or no plan, hope or no hope at all. Indeed, heat lay on the pits like a heavy blanket. The far barracks with the red roof sat beyond a fence of wire strung low, the kind that bites horses and knees. Guards drifted along the line like cattle dogs, quiet and sharp. Arcady kept one hand on the bell and the other near the music box, as if sound alone could hold men still. Rook felt time thinning. He reached into his vest and touched the loose clapper he had taken from the coach trunk. Iron warm from the sun. An idea rose clear. He slid close to the table, while Arcady's eyes tracked Silas's slow sway. He lifted the bell to study its shine, and swapped the clapper in a motion he once used to palm dice. The bell looked the same, but its mouth was empty now. No sound would answer a swing. Arcady smiled at Rook as if sharing a joke. He did not see the absence. Rook stepped back and let his heart settle. He caught Jory's eye and gave a small nod. The boy edged along the office wall toward the fence with a pair of snips he had stolen from the yard shack. "Now," Silas spoke loud enough for the guards to hear and the pits to hold. "You sell mercy like salt," he said. Arcady tilted his head, polite as rain. Dust swirled in spirals at his feet. "I sell roads," he said softly. "I relieve men of choices they cannot carry." Silas smiled without teeth. "You relieve pockets of coins and homes of daughters." Arcady's eyes cooled a shade. He lifted the silent bell and rang it. Nothing. Guards frowned. He rang again, harder. Silence sat on his hand like a bird that refused to sing. Rook felt Jory's snips bite the wire and kept his face still. Arcady set the bell down with care and turned the music box key twice. Then again, as if louder tune could fix mute metal. The song flew bright and wrong across the pits. From the barracks porch, a woman stepped into the light and shielded her eyes with a bound wrist. Rook's heart slammed once, then steadied. Isolde. Her hair was cut ragged, her face thinner, her eyes the same river color that had washed him clean years ago. She saw the ribbon tied to his wrist was gone and lifted her chin anyway. Rook walked forward with his hands open until the fence bit his thighs. Sun burned the wire bright enough to sting his eyes. He met Isolde's eyes and lifted the strip of blue cloth from the pump, pinched between 2 fingers. Her mouth softened in a way that meant she had not surrendered. A guard barked at her to get back inside. She did not move. Arcady gestured 2 men toward the barracks. Rook's chest filled with a slow, heavy heat that did not shake his hands. He spoke to Arcady without looking at him. "Let them go," he said. Arcady smiled. "You know I cannot," he said gently. He placed his palm on the music box, and the tune hopped like a goat on rock. Rook flicked his eyes to Silas. The old lawman steadied his rifle and breathed once. Jory finished the cut and slipped through the fence like a mouse, belly to dirt, moving toward the barracks skirt. He vanished under the porch boards. Rook took 1 step along the fence to draw eyes away. Arcady lifted the bell again on habit. It was still quiet. He frowned at it as if it had insulted him personally. Under the porch, Jory found a crawl space that smelled like old water and mice. He pushed past web and splinters to a trap grate beneath the barracks hall. Above him, boots thudded and a woman coughed. He pressed his ear to the wood and heard Isolde's voice, low and steady, asking names, saying please, teaching women how to fold fear small so it would fit in a pocket. Jory worked at the great nails with the snips until his hands bled a little. He lifted the square and slid up into a dark hall lined with cots. Women stared with eyes wide as moons. Isolde stepped to him like a teacher to a scared child. "You are brave," she whispered. "Please hurry." He shook his head. "I am small and fast," he said. She smiled even now. He pointed to the gap and moved his hands like a river. One by one, the women dropped to their bellies and slid into the crawl like letters into a secret pouch. Isolde held the last spot and met his eyes. "Where is Rook?" she asked. "Here," a voice said soft behind her, and she turned into a pair of arms she knew. Rook's hands closed on Isolde's shoulders like a prayer finally answered. He had slipped through the cut as Jory worked, and moved along the barracks wall like a shadow drawn by love. He smelled her hair and earth and iron, and the river of their kitchen mornings. He wanted to say 100 things, and instead said, "I am late." She put her forehead to his and said, "You are here." A guard shouted. Silas's rifle spoke twice, then once more. Rook guided Isolde to the gap and nodded. She went first because she was brave. "We go home now together." Rook turned and faced the door as footsteps hammered. Arcady's voice rose in a sermon tone outside, telling men that sin was stubborn and needed fire. He lifted the bell out of reflex and it stayed mute. He rang the music instead, and the bright tune made anger seem tidy. Rook smiled without humor, stepped into the hall, and pulled the fire alarm cord he had seen beside the door. A rusted bell inside the wall screamed alive. Panic moved like wind. Smoke charges popped under the porch where Silas had planted them. The world turned quick and loud. Smoke rolled from under the porch and hugged the ground, thick and low. Men coughed and stumbled, hands out, eyes streaming. The rusted bell in the wall screamed and would not stop. Arcady's face stayed polite, but his jaw hardened. He raised the silent bell out of habit and found no sound to control the room. His eyes flicked to Rook with new interest, like a teacher who finds a student awake. Rook stepped into the yard with his knife bare and his body quiet as a coiled rope. Guards spread, guns lifting to easy aim. Silas shot first, taking a rifle from a hand and a man from his feet. Jory popped up by the fence and threw stones into eyes with country boy aim. Isolde slid women into the crawl until the board swallowed all but the last two. Then she turned and stood in the doorway, back straight, daring the world to come. Arcady lifted the music box and began to preach, words like sugar over old meat. Rook did not listen. He moved toward him slow, eyes on the key, the lid, the precise little gears that made lies seem sweet as apples. For her, Varek appeared through smoke like a story men tell to scare boys. His grin had gone thin, and his knife looked eager. Dust-stung eyes and throats raw. He tossed the cut blue ribbon like a toy and caught it again. "Brother," he said, "you and I were always going to finish in a yard like this." Rook felt his breath go calm. He lifted empty hands and let the knife hang low. Varek circled, kept distance, and spoke to keep Rook's ears busy. "You walked away from the road," he said. "I built it wide and rich. You chose one woman. I chose the world." Rook said, "I chose to keep my word." Varek lunged with a cat's quick joy. Rook shifted, took the wrist, and let the blade pass his ribs for skin and heat, not death. He turned Varek's arm and heard a small pop as a tendon cried. Varek hissed and laughed at the same time. He kicked Rook's knee and they went down together, rolling in dust and smoke, knives and fingers talking more than words. The bell in the wall rang and rang. The music box tune kept hopping like something alive and stupid. Silas limped into the open, set his back to the engine wheel, and became a door. Men who tried to rush the porch found neat pain arriving before their feet did. He worked the rifle until the bolt grew hot, then his pistol until it clicked empty, then a club made from a wrench that loved his hand. Blood ran down his arm like red rope. Jory darted between legs and bit ankles with a borrowed knife, then vanished into smoke with a laugh that sounded scared and proud. Isolde kicked a guard in the shin and took his hat to hide her face as she led the last two women into the kraal. She turned back to find Rook, because home has a sound, and she could hear it under the noise. Arcady set the music box down on the table and lifted a long gun he kept beneath. He opened his mouth to say mercy again. Isolde picked up the silent bell and threw it with both hands in a clean arc. It hit Arcady in the mouth like a loud truth. Teeth flashed, blood bloomed, and the long gun fired into the sky instead of into Rook. Rook felt the heat of the bullet pass his ear like a quick hand. He did not pause. Blood ticked from his ear and fell on his collar. He stepped through Varek's next feint and put his forehead to the other man's nose hard enough to make both eyes water. Varek cursed, laughed, and raked Rook's side with the point of his blade. Pain wrote its letters, but Rook had learned to read and keep walking. He took Varek's wrist again, used his elbow like a hammer, and dropped the knife into dust. Varek grabbed for the ribbon on his own belt, and Rook took his throat. They froze, both hearing the same thing at once. A whistle from the north line, long and low. A train, coming fast, likely full of bodies and buyers. Arcady spat red and tried to stand. Silas, ribs heaving, pointed his wrench at the office. Papers, he said. Ledger and lists. Burn them. Rook looked at Varek's eyes and saw a boy who had once run messages in a storm. He loosened his hand just enough to speak. You can stop now, he said. Varek smiled like a cut and tried to bite him. Rook hit him once, clean and final, and Varek went boneless. The whistle wailed again, close now, the rails humming with power. Rook kicked the knife away, turned, and ran for the office. Isolde was already there, face set, hands quick. She threw drawers, tore pages, and found the ledger with Iron Briar's neat lies. Rook splashed lamp oil over the book and the tidy stacks and struck a match. Flame climbed like it had always wanted this job. Arcady staggered toward the doorway, mouth bleeding, eyes still kind. He said, "Think of the poor," as if he meant it. Isolde looked at him in a way that made Rook proud for the rest of his life. She said, "I am," and kicked his knee out. He fell, gentle for once. Silas shouldered the music box off the table and crushed it beneath the engine wheel with one hard push. The tune died. The new train blew its horn long and loud as it rolled into view. Smoke billowed, brakes screamed, and faces stared from slats, eyes wide. He raised both palms. Rook stepped into the yard with fire at his back and lifted his hands to stop a machine. The engineer on the new train saw a man in dust and blood with his hands up and a yard full of smoke and strangers. He threw the brake and blew the horn until the world shook. Cars clanged, couplers groaned, and the long black line shuddered to a stop that felt like a giant deciding to sit. Men leaned from doors with eyes big as hunger. Women reached small hands through slats. Silas walked into view with his badge pinned crooked and his wrench on his shoulder like a law. He pointed the engineer toward the office and the burning papers. Rook stepped to the nearest door, cut the chain, and pulled it wide. Bodies poured out like water breaking a dam. Some fell and kissed the ground. Some stood and stared as if the world had changed shape while they rode. Isolde moved among them with a calm that made space where panic